Okay, why don't we go ahead and get started? So, hello everyone. Welcome to Ask the Grant Writing Expert. I'm Dr. Meg Bouvier. You know me as the creator of your library of NIH grantsmanship courses. I have over 35 years of experience at NIH as an applicant, an intramural researcher, a staff writer, and now as a full-time grant mentor. I've helped clients land more than $500 million in federal funding, and I'm here to answer your grant writing questions. So grab a cup of coffee and let's get started. So if you're attending live, a reminder that on this format, you're in listen-only mode. If you look on your toolbar, you'll see a Q&A box. You can type your questions in there. You can start typing them at any time. You can do that now if you'd like. And if you're watching this as a recording, and more of our audience is watching this as recordings, either in their course library or on our open YouTube channel, just a reminder that this session was recorded on November 13th, 2024. So everything that we're saying is true to the best of our knowledge today, but things move very quickly at NIH. So be sure to double check and make sure everything is still accurate. So this isn't meant to replace advising from a program officer, for example. So what you should be viewing in the library now, well, if you are targeting a February deadline, February or March, you may want to be looking at, if you're brand spanking new to the NIH grant writing process and you've never written an NIH application, you may want to check out our NIH grant writing program, which is kind of like our core cornerstone Master the R series course on steroids. It's that plus additional information, additional instruction for those who have never written a grant application. Or you could just watch Master the R series. I would begin with the chapter 1 preparation right now. If you missed our boot camp, you may want to watch the recording of our recent boot camp sessions. That's the most up-to-date version of our slides, because I update those every couple of months. So in terms of updates from NIH right now, I mean, the big news is that we're still under a continuing resolution at NIH. There is no funding bill for Health and Human Services, last I checked. And so when that happens, NIH operates under what's called a continuing resolution, or a CR, which is a temporary funding bill. So basically what that means is most of the institutes at NIH will operate at about 80% of the previous fiscal year's budget, just to hedge their bet, because they don't have a budget number. So why should you care about this if you're an NIH applicant? It may mean that your notice of award is held up. So if you have an application that was reviewed recently and you scored, somewhere around the funding line, an institute may delay issuing a notice of award until they have a firm idea of what their budget number is going to be for the upcoming fiscal year. So hard to know when we're going to have a budget for Health and Human Services. It could be imminent. It could be February. It could be April. Kind of hard to say. So we wait and see. Other NIH updates, of course, for applications with deadlines on or after January 25th. NIH will be implementing Forms I, a new form set, and the headline there for people writing in the R series is that there are new scoring criteria. I do discuss those in the bootcamp course, so feel free to check that out in your course library. And there are changes for other mechanisms as well. So for example, if you're writing an institutional training grant like a T32, there are some changes to the training tables. I still need to go in and make those changes to the Master the T32 course. So, there'll be soft launching changes to the BioSketch format as well. So sorry, my cat is walking across the screen again. And people have been asking me about doing a mini tutorial on the new NIH format. We're hoping to do one on February 5th. That isn't definite, but right now I just had a cancellation for that date. So we may be able to work in a mini tutorial on the NIH BioSketch for February 5th. So the new NIH BioSketch is not going to be required until you have until May. So if you have a deadline with an application deadline for May 25th or later, you'll be required to use the NIH, new NIH BioSketch. For the February and March deadlines, they're soft launching the new BioSketch, so you can use the new one or not. All right, so we do have a mini tutorial for today. I know that a couple of people have put questions in the Q&A box, so feel free to keep putting questions in there. I'll have time to answer them. Before I answer those, I am going to, hold on, I'm having a little trouble working around my cat. For some reason lately, every time I get on to an Ask the Grant Writing Expert session, she decides that she needs attention. So let's start with, hold on a second, with the mini tutorial. So I have some new slides that I developed recently about using acronyms. So hopefully you guys are seeing my screen with option 1 for acronym. So a lot of NIH applicants find that when they write their grant application, let's say it's like a molecular biology project and you have dozens of acronyms. What do I do about defining all those acronyms? And some people opt to define the acronym on every use. So that is space gobbling, to say the least. So there are several ways that I suggest people handle a lot of acronyms within the research strategy. This is one of them. So often what I will do is in the research strategy at the very beginning in the significance section in the top right corner, I'll sometimes put an acronym box like this one here. This is from an actual application that I worked on. And what I tend to do is I collect these in a separate document while I'm editing the draft. And then I define them. And then at the end, I list them alphabetically. I drop the font to 9 point, I put it in a text box, and I copy and paste it into the document. If there are a ton of them, I'll insert a slight space in between the lines and maybe shade the background. This makes a nice, something that's easy on the eyes, easy to refer back to as reviewers are reading through the application. And I find that pretty helpful. I tend to bold the acronym itself. Yeah, and I said all of those. So yeah, so this is one strategy that I use. I wouldn't use this on the Ames page because it's one page. It's not a dense 12-page document. I would only do this on the research strategy. And then this is another version that I'll sometimes use. Pardon me, I'm having a lot of allergy problems now that we've shut the windows and my dust allergies are getting bad. So here, I don't know if you can see it on, actually it may be more visible on your screen, but the, like here, the acronym ALD, AUD is in blue. So kind of a medium blue, not too light, not too dark. So if you don't have a lot of acronyms and they're used heavily in one location, sometimes I'll do this so that if a reviewer is a couple of pages away, it's easy to scroll back and look for blue acronym definitions. This is also the strategy that I'll often use on the Ames page. I think that this can be an effective way to do it on the Ames page. So usually defining your acronyms toward the beginning of the Ames page. And then when you get down into the middle to bottom, if the reviewer comes across an acronym they don't know, it's very easy to look up and find where the blue acronym is defined. So these are just two options for how to do this. One question that I was asked at boot camp, which was a great question, is should you define acronyms at the beginning of every section? And my answer to that is you should define, in my opinion, you should define the acronyms at the beginning of each section of the grant application, but not within the sections within the research strategy. So I'll define all the acronyms on the Ames page, and then I'll define them again at the beginning of the research strategy. But I won't define them in significance and then again in innovation and then again in approach. Because for reviewers, the way that they're viewing the grant application is in a PDF with tabs. So there's one tab for the Ames, one tab for the research strategy, another tab for the project summary, another tab for bio sketches. So, like I think as long as they're reading within a given tab, I don't think it's a big deal to expect them to scroll back and forth to look for acronyms, but I don't expect them to jump between tabs to look for the acronyms. So that's just my personal preference. So I would do it in the AIMS page and again at the beginning of the research strategy, but not within each separate section of the research strategy. So hopefully that's useful for you. Let me close that up and go to the questions. Okay, and feel free, for those who are just joining us, it looks like more people logged on. Feel free to put your questions in the Q&A. Okay, my questions are for my K grant. One, reviewers made overly ambitious comments on my proposal. What should I do to address their concerns, add more preliminary data, or cut down on the aims? And two, how do I address aim dependency issue, completely change one or reword to make it sound less dependent? Okay, so let's take these one at a time. So the first part is that they said the project was overly ambitious. So I don't know if the training plan was overly ambitious or the research strategy was overly ambitious. Based on your suggestion of like, what do I do to address their concerns, add more preliminary data or cut down on the aims? I'm guessing that they said that the research strategy was too ambitious and the training plan was the scope of it was okay. I would focus the project and do a smaller project. So this is something that you should be discussing with your mentors, particularly mentors. If you have you should have a primary mentor who has experience, at least one of them should have experience mentoring at the K level. I would ask that person how to narrow the scope of the K. So it may be a question of removing an aim. It may be a question of reducing the scope of each aim. But when they say overly ambitious on a K, and they're talking about the research strategy and not the training plan, you need to tighten up the project and make it something that's more doable with the time and the budget allowed. And then the second part was, how do I address a name dependency issue? So this is relevant to both K and R series applications. So people talk about the fact that your aims should be, they shouldn't be contingent. They should be relevant to one another, but they should be able to stand alone whenever possible. And the reason for this is that reviewers worry that if your aims are contingent, let's say you have two or three aims, if your aims are contingent and aim one fails, the whole project is shot. You can't do the rest of the project. So having said that, there are many projects where the aims are contingent, many funded successful projects where the aims are contingent. So what's the trick there in terms of a workaround with the reviewers? Well, the goal is to convince them that the early aim or aims are highly feasible, either because they're largely done, or all of the methodology already exists in the lab, or the mouse model is already created, or the samples are already collected, or whatever it is. Like we already have the expertise to do this methodology, so the feasibility is extremely high. So when at all possible, try not to make your aims contingent. However, many projects have contingent, many successful projects have contingent aims. And the trick there when you're writing it up is to convince reviewers that the early aim or aims are highly feasible and very low risk. So the odds of them failing is extremely low. Okay, next question. And for those who are just joining, another batch of people just logged on, feel free to add questions to the question box. If the percentile score is well within the fundable payline, when do I need to start working on just-in-time and IRB process? After post-advisory council meeting and receiving confirmation of funding, or rather do them before those? Well, you probably already got a just-in-time request, is my guess. And when you say it's well within the fundable payline, if it's truly well within the fundable payline, like you scored it, it's an R01 and it's scored like in the second percentile, and there's just absolutely no question that it's going to be funded, I would just start working on them right away. There's no reason to delay working on the just-in-time and IRB processes. You might as well get going on them. You may want to double check with the program officer that it's well within the fundable payline. I trust that that's accurate, but I think paylines are, I think people are nervous. Um, I'll say that. I think people are nervous about the budget for NIH under the incoming administration. Um, based on what the incoming administration did years ago in its first term, the incoming administration voted an extreme budget cut for NIH, which and wanted to do away with overhead entirely. So um, it was such a draconian proposal that it backfired, and policy lawmakers on both sides of the aisle in Congress joined together to vote an increase to NIH. So NIH was one of the only funding agencies that enjoyed a budget increase under the previous Trump administration. Um, that said, um, I would not be, and that was before COVID. But that said, I would not be surprised if the incoming administration in the upcoming years voted budget cuts that weren't quite so draconian. And given the widespread support in Congress for Republicans, I think a lot of people are nervous that NIH is going to experience some budget cuts. And I think that institutes are being very conservative in what they're saying is a fundable project right now. So I would just double check that that score truly is well within the fundable pay line. And if it really is, then I would go ahead and start working on your just-in-time and IRB process. Okay, another question, very elementary questions. I'm new to this world. Where do we find grants to apply for? Okay, that's a great question. So I actually, let's see, I can pull up my, there are slides in Master the R series that deal with this. So if you should have, I think everybody on this call has access to Master the R series, but there's an entire section in chapter 1 of Master the R series preparation that deals with this topic. So given that we don't have another question, I'm going to see if I can quickly pull that up for you. Let's see. Oh, here we go. All right. I'm in the right lesson. Here we go. Okay, let me share my screen. Okay, and okay, so this is where you typically go to look for funding opportunity announcements. So I'm going to capture this URL and put it in the chat for you. But basically what you're going to do is go to this URL and then click whatever you need to. In fact, you know what? We don't have another question, so I'm just going to do it live. Why not, right? So let me just grab that. And we can look at that live. Okay, it looks like they revamped this a little bit. I'm just going to screen share this page. So the screenshot looks a little different than the last time I looked, but funding category, let's say you're going to say research and development, funding organization. You could say like your specific institute. There's usually one you can check off for all of NIH. Let me see if it's on here, NIH wide. And then you could put a keyword in here. And then you can also, oh, they took out the filter for mechanisms. Let's say research projects. Maybe it's in the advanced search category. So you can look for, let's say you want to look for a new one. And you could look for, whatever type, all or just RFAs or whatever. Oh, here's the activity code. So it's in the advanced search. So they've changed it within the last few months. Well, let's say you're just looking for R01s. And you could put some key words here. Let's say you're looking at clinical trials not allowed. What's funding instrument? You want grants. And then you would search. Oh, why is that not searching? Yeah, I don't know why that's being weird. But anyway, that's the page. I'm gonna have to play around with that because they've changed it and it looks like it's a little wonky. So anyway, that's the URL. I'm going to drop that in the chat. Um, I don't know why they changed it. It was perfectly good last time, and it doesn't seem to be working particularly well. Okay, let's see. Hello, I haven't had a chance to dig into your site yet to learn more about how the combination of significance and innovation should be handled in new R01 applications. Could you speak to this as long as we have time? Okay, yes, and we have one other after that, so I should have time for both of these. Sure. So the I think a couple of weeks ago, I addressed how the new scoring criteria are going to be for significance and innovation and ask the grant writing experts. So if you want to like dig into the weeds of that, you could look at the recording of that AGE. It's factor 2 under the new scoring criteria on your dashboard. I'm just going to give you a high level overview right now. So in the current system that we've had in place since like, I don't know, 2009 or 8 or something like that, there are 5 scored criteria, 2 of which are significance and innovation. Under the new scoring criteria that's going into effect with deadlines on or after January 25th, those are going to be folded into a single scored criteria called factor 1 importance of the research. So the key changes here are that instead of getting 2 individually scored criteria, they're lumped into one single scored criteria. It's the same thing where you get your scored 1 to 9, 1 being the best. And it makes it a little bit easier for people where they're doing a project where it's most appropriate scientifically for them to use a technique that isn't some splashy new innovative technique, but it's like the tried and true technique. So the project doesn't appear to necessarily be using like innovative methodology, but it is the most scientifically appropriate way to do it. And maybe it's innovative in other ways, in the way it's asking a certain question, or it's innovative because it's filling a knowledge gap, or exploring some new area. So it kind of prevents the problem under the old scoring system where people like that might have received a poor innovation score, even though they were doing something that was scientifically appropriate for their project. So I kind of like it. And it says it in the scored criteria for innovation. The first question to reviewers is, should innovative methodology even be considered for this project? Is that something that's really going to have a profound effect on impact for this project? So I really like this change. We do have as I said, the AGE discussion recently. There's also a blog post, and in both of those, we created a table that shows a side by side of the old scoring criteria and the new scoring criteria. I think I did one Ask the Grant Writing Expert mini tutorial on factor 1 and one on factors 2 and 3. I think I combined those, and blog posts for each of those as well. So if you want to dig into the weeds, feel free to do that. I also talk about it on the recent boot camp, but that's kind of the high level overview of it. Okay, and in our last few minutes, I just finished a grant from NSF. The project turned out differently from how I anticipated. That's always the case, right? We ended up mainly focusing on one of the 3 aims because the pandemic interrupted things, and 2, the science from that aim took us in an unexpected direction. That's great. However, I still think the ideas for the other two aims are good and would like to write a grant that includes a version of them slightly adjusted by what we learned. What is the best way to do that, including work that was not completed on a funded grant in a new grant application? Well, that would be unpublished preliminary data, right? Like you could say these are the unpublished data, aim one data from the NSF application could become preliminary data to provide the rationale for proposing aims 2 and 3 in a new NIH grant application. So I would just include them as unpublished preliminary data. And I would say that those preliminary data were obtained under a funded NSF project. And you could even tell this story. I think reviewers are very receptive to this kind of thing because it shows a certain amount of, sophistication and professionalism on the part of the team, in that they proposed 3 aims. They got these unexpected results from aim 1. It took them in another direction that was very fruitful and resulted in lots of preliminary data. And now they would like to go back and do aims 2 and 3 in a slightly modified version based on what they learned from that project. So you could even tell that story in the grant application. So in your research strategy, in the approach section, I would present it as preliminary data, and then maybe tell that story in the personal statement of the biosketch, demonstrating that you as a PI are able to lead a project even when the unexpected occurs. You're able to lead a project in an appropriate and fruitful direction that results in compelling data that will be published. So I think that's perfectly fine to do. And this person said, in this case, it's really the aims 1 and 2 from the previous grant. They're slightly different, but mainly the same as in the previous grant. Well, as long as you're not proposing to do the same thing, I mean, it sounds like on the NSF project, aim 1 took you in a different direction. So you didn't really do aim 1 as you proposed initially on the NSF grant, right? So the trick here is you can't propose to do something in an NIH grant that you already did, funded at NIH or NSF or anywhere else. If it's already done, you don't want to propose it. But you could tell this story that, these were the original aims of an NSF grant, and then the data took us in a completely different direction, but we're returning to that those original aims in a modified version because we still feel like those aims are worth pursuing. And here's the preliminary data from the NSF grant. Like, I would be very open about what you're doing. I wouldn't try to, I would say that this is what happened. We proposed it as an NSF. We went in this direction because XYZ happened. We got these preliminary data. Now we're revisiting those 2 aims from the NSF in a modified version. We think they're worth doing. Here's the preliminary data that we obtained from the NSF grant, and now we're proposing to do this. Obviously, it has to have some kind of biomedical spin to it if you're going to NIH. But I would just tell the story. I would be very above board about it. And obviously, don't apply for funding for something that's already done. So I hope that answers the question. And you can run it by a program officer too, tell the story to a program officer where you can talk to somebody who's a subject matter expert and dig into the details of the science a little bit more. But in these instances, I think it's best to just be above board and just say that that's what happened. So, and that's it for today. So I think we got through all the questions. Yep, we did. So thank you all for attending. The next session is canceled because of Thanksgiving, American Thanksgiving. So we'll be coming back in December for another session. And if you are just dying to get more Ask the Grant Writing Expert, you can watch back videos in your course library. And I hope some of you will go to First Fridays, which is on December 6th. So it's the first Friday of every month at 11:30 Eastern time. It's a very relaxed office hours. You just drop in, come and go as you want. And It's not recorded. There are no guests. There are no mini tutorials. You just come. It's usually small enough that I can enable people to speak, and you can get personalized advising there. So I hope to see some of you there. And it looks like the login is in the chat. It looks like Riley just dropped the login in the chat. So feel free to grab that, register for First Fridays, and I hope to see some of you there. So have a great week, everybody, and good luck with your grant writing. Take care. Bye-bye.